A flight for love and justice. The cabin of the plane buzzed with the usual pre-flight chatter, but the air turned electric when a sharp voice cut through the hum. "That seat is mine," a woman bellowed, her words slicing across the rows. She stood in the aisle, yanking her oversized suitcase, glaring at a frail 93-year-old man struggling to steady himself in seat 7C. His weathered hand gripped his cane, and his grandson, Tom, held his arm tightly, his face tight with worry. Whispers rippled through the cabin as passengers turned, some pulling out phones, their screens glowing in the dim light. What unfolded next was a clash of entitlement and compassion, a story of strangers uniting to defend love and decency in the face of cruelty, a story that would leave no one on that flight unchanged. 6 hours earlier, at 6:15 a.m., Tom's phone shattered the quiet of his Chicago apartment. Groggy, he assumed it was another robocall, but the voice on the line froze his blood. "Tom Harper, this is Dr. Ellen Carter from St. John's Hospital in Kansas City. Your grandmother, Eleanor Harper, needs emergency heart surgery. She's asking for your grandfather. Can you get him here?" Tom's stomach churned. Eleanor, 90, had been managing her heart condition with medication, but this was dire. "They've been married 65 years, Tom said, his voice catching. "They've never spent a day apart since their honeymoon." Dr. Carter's sigh carried the weight of countless stories like this. "Then you know why he needs to be here." Tom pictured his grandfather, George Harper, at his assisted living home in Denver, sipping coffee and reading the Denver Post, as he had for decades. At 93, George's sharp mind could still recite every Rockies game score from the past 10 years, but his body was failing him. Arthritis, a walker, and fading hearing made travel grueling. Yet Tom knew nothing would stop George from reaching Eleanor's side. Their love was the kind you read about in novels, the kind where they still called each other darling after 65 years. "I'll get him there," Tom promised, already dialing the nursing home. The staff confirmed George's distress. He'd collapsed from the news, not physically, but emotionally, clutching their wedding photo and weeping. When Tom reached him, George's voice trembled but held resolve. "Tom, I can't let her face this alone. We promised each other 65 years ago we'd always be there." Tom, fighting tears, began searching for flights. Denver to Kansas City was a 3-hour trip, but last-minute tickets were scarce and exorbitant. Most economy seats were booked, and George's mobility issues made cramped seats unbearable. After 25 minutes of frantic searching, Tom secured seat 7C in the premium cabin, an aisle seat with extra legroom, perfect for George's needs, though it cost triple the usual fare. Tom didn't hesitate. This flight could be the most important of George's life. By 10:30 a.m., Tom was at Sunset Pines, George's assisted living home. George sat in his recliner, gripping his cane, worry etched into his face. "What if we're delayed, Tom? What if I don't make it in time?" he asked, his voice shaking. Tom knelt beside him. "Grandpa, we've got the best seat. You'll be holding Grandma's hand before dinner." The 45-minute drive to Denver International Airport was tense, George checking his old Timex watch, a 25th anniversary gift from Eleanor, every few minutes. "She's scared of hospitals," he murmured. "Ever since her mother passed in one back in 78. At the airport, TSA agents were kind, one older officer escorting them through the special assistance line, sparing George the ordeal of removing his shoes. At the gate, they met a Vietnam veteran named Frank Thompson, whose quiet dignity mirrored George's. "Heading somewhere important?" Frank asked, his southern drawl soft. "My grandfather's flying to see his wife," Tom replied. "She's having heart surgery." George added, 65 years we've been married. Never spent a day apart until I moved to assisted living." Frank nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. "That's something special, sir." As pre-boarding began, Tom helped George onto the plane, where flight attendant Sarah Miller greeted them warmly. "Mr. Harper, I'm Sarah. We'll make sure you're comfortable," she said, guiding George to seat 7C. Tom showed George a photo of Eleanor in her hospital bed, wearing the blue cardigan he'd bought her. George's fingers brushed the screen. "She's tired, but still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Then came the disruption. A woman in her early 40s, Linda Grayson, stormed down the aisle, her heels clicking like gunfire. Her tailored blazer and sleek blonde hair screamed corporate executive, but her demeanor screamed entitlement. "Excuse me," she snapped, holding up her phone. "There's a mistake. That's my seat." Tom, stunned, pulled out their boarding passes. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we reserved 7C this morning. My grandfather needs the aisle for mobility." Linda barely glanced at the papers. "Digital passes can be altered. I booked this seat a week ago through premium services. Your grandfather can sit anywhere else." Tom's anger flared, but he kept his voice steady. "He's traveling for a medical emergency. His wife is having heart surgery." Linda's expression didn't soften. "Business travel takes priority. I paid for this seat for my meetings in Kansas City." George spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "Ma'am, I just need to get to my wife. She's scared, and we've been together 65 years. Linda's response shocked the cabin into silence. "Dying people can sit anywhere, can't they?" Gasps echoed around them. Frank Thompson stood, his voice booming. "Ma'am, I served in Vietnam, and I've never seen such disrespect for a Korean War veteran trying to reach his dying wife." Passengers began recording, their phones capturing Linda's cruelty. Sarah Miller approached, trying to mediate, but Linda doubled down, waving her phone. "I have proof I reserved this seat. These people are manipulating emotions to steal it." Then a man in his 50s, David Carter, a fraud investigator, stepped forward. "I've been watching, and I photographed her boarding pass earlier. The timestamp's been altered." Linda's face flushed as David displayed evidence of her manipulation. She shrieked, "That's harassment. I'll report this to management." But the tide had turned. An elderly woman, Martha Evans, from a church group, stood. "Young lady, I've flown for 40 years and never seen such shameful behavior." A young mother, Jenny Brooks, added, "Even my 5-year-old knows to help those in need." As the confrontation escalated, Linda began live streaming, framing herself as a victim of airline discrimination. But her plan backfired. Frank addressed her audience. "This woman's trying to take a seat from a 93-year-old veteran rushing to his dying wife." Comments flooded her screen, condemning her. Linda's composure cracked, but she refused to back down, shoving her suitcase against George's legs in a desperate attempt to claim the seat. George clutched his chest, gasping. "I can't breathe," he whispered, his face ashen. Tom hit the call button as Sarah rushed over with an oxygen tank. The cabin erupted in outrage. Frank roared, "You just assaulted a veteran." Passengers formed a protective wall around George, their unity palpable. Then came the footsteps, calm, deliberate. Tom turned to see his old college friend, Michael Reynolds, in a pilot's uniform. "Tom, what's going on?" Michael asked, his eyes scanning the scene. Tom explained, and Michael's demeanor shifted to one of authority. Addressing Linda, he said, "Ma'am, I'm trying to resolve this." Linda, assuming he was just crew, snapped, "I want the captain." Michael adjusted his collar, revealing captain's stripes. "I am the captain, ma'am. I'm Captain Michael Reynolds, and this is my aircraft." The cabin fell silent, Linda's face paling. Michael continued, "You've engaged in fraud, assaulted a passenger, and endangered flight safety. You're leaving this plane." Linda protested, but Michael was firm. "Security's on their way." As security escorted Linda off, passengers applauded, their cheers echoing. Michael knelt beside George. "Sir, we'll get you to your wife. I promise." The flight proceeded quietly, with passengers offering George words of comfort. In Kansas City, Michael ensured George deplaned first, with a wheelchair waiting. Frank helped them to the taxi stand, saying, "It's been an honor, sir. You show us what love looks like." The taxi ride to St. John's Hospital took 18 minutes, George clutching his cane, muttering, "What if I'm too late?" At the hospital, Dr. Carter greeted them. "She's been asking for you." In room 312, Eleanor's face lit up as George's cane tapped the floor. "George, I knew you'd come," she whispered. He took her hand, tears streaming. "Margaret, my darling, thank God I made it." They spoke of their 65 years, through war, hardship, and joy, reaffirming their wedding vow to face life hand in hand. Eleanor smiled weakly. "If this is goodbye, know these years with you were my greatest gift." George kissed her hand. "I love you, Eleanor. Always have, always will." The surgery lasted 4 hours. Michael arrived with flowers and a card signed by passengers. Dr. Carter emerged with heavy news. Eleanor survived the surgery, but suffered a fatal stroke in recovery. George absorbed it with quiet strength, holding her hand until the end. 3 months later, Frank sent Tom a framed photo of the passengers, signed with messages of love. George lived 6 more months, sharing his and Eleanor's story, marveling at the strangers who united for them. That flight showed me there's still good in this world, he'd say. This story of a 65-year love, a community's stand against cruelty, and a captain's quiet heroism reminds us that decency can triumph. What do you think about standing up to injustice? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment like this, where ordinary people made a difference? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss how we confront cruelty and uphold compassion in our lives.